Chapter 1 of The Wind by Dorothy Scarborough. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Hawaii in July 2021. A young girl was traveling alone on a westbound train one day in late December between Christmas and the New Year. Family loyalty had named her Letitia after a great aunt, but affection had softened that to Letty, so that she had not suffered unduly. Until recently, love had smoothed all things in her life. She was a pretty girl, who looked younger than her 18 years, a slight and almost childish figure in her black dress, with her blonde and wavy hair, her eyes blue as periwinkles in old-fashioned gardens, and her cheeks delicately pink as the petals of peach blooms. She looked tired now, however, for she had come all the distance from Virginia to Texas. She had spent the night at Fort Worth to break her journey, and now she was on the last day of her trip. She would reach Sweetwater that night. She had never seen Sweetwater, nor heard it described, and she knew of it only as a postmark on a letter. But the name was pleasant sounding, and so she whispered it to herself from time to time, while her fancy conjured up pictures of what the little town would look like. There would be home-like houses with their dream-inviting open fires in big fireplaces, and their porches overgrown with vines, as in the Virginia villages she knew. There would be lawns and orchards, and gardens with all the flowers one loved, each in its season, a cycle of beauty from early spring to late fall. And trees, of course, whose great, benignant branches sheltered nesting birds in spring, whose leaves in summer laced the sky and rustled softly when the wind blew, and sometimes hung as motionless as pictured leaves when there was no breeze. Would there be a little river, perhaps, slipping like a silver shadow through the town, where a girl and a boy might row a boat on summer afternoons? Or a creek that showed rainbow minnows in its shallows and ferns along the banks? Or a lake, if only a tiny one, or a pond where water lilies bloomed with creamy petals and hearts of gold, and water hyacinths purple-blue? One thing she was sure of, there would be water, sweet and cool and pure, for wasn't a place named Sweetwater? As one visions heaven according to his dreams of loved earthly beauty, so Letty Mason pieced together a Sweetwater that was to contain all the things she cared for most. She had to do something to keep from being too bitterly unhappy. When there was nothing to look to but a past that grief and separation had broken up, and a future that held she knew not what, and only so much of a present as a ride on a train, what could a girl do? She gave a look at her present in an impulse of panic, to escape the sorrow of yesterdays and the terror of unknown tomorrows. The day coach, with its rows of red plush seats, all turned the same way like people that dared not look behind them, would be all right for anyone who was not alone and unhappy and afraid. Until a few months ago, Letty could have laughed and had fun in it, while now it seemed ugly and hostile. At one end of the coach there was a big blackened coal bin, and an iron stove as huge and red as a Santa Claus, when the brakeman had stuffed it with coal. There were not many passengers in the car, a few men with broad-brimmed Stetson hats, several mothers with their babies, a few older children, and one grandmotherly gray-haired woman crocheting white-thread lace. A little girl in a red plaid dress and hair braided in tight, serious pigtails kept pacing up and down the aisle, touching the tops of the seats as if in some mysterious game. An urchin of about 5, with eyes as round and expressionless as glass marbles, spilled his plump body half over the seat in front of Letty, and stared at her without winking. She tried to smile at him, but she could not manage the necessary energy, and in fact the youngster seemed to expect no response to his scrutiny. A man across the aisle looked at her now and then over the top of his Dallas News, and smiled tentatively, but she turned away each time. He was a rather handsome man, with wavy black hair and dark eyes and a moustache that quirked up at the ends. He was proud of that moustache, she decided, for he played with it affectionately. He looked old, over 30, she felt sure. There was something faintly familiar about him, suggestive of someone else she had known, perhaps long ago. As she looked at him surreptitiously, she was sure that she had never seen this man before, because he was a person that she would have remembered if she had ever known him, but he was teasingly reminiscent of another. Who was it? She tried to analyze the impressions he called up, half pleasurable recollections, half fear and repulsion, vaguely commingled as in the waking remembrance of a dream. When she had been traveling for several hours, the conductor came along and stopped to speak to her, as if he thought she might be lonesome. "Getting on all hunky-dory?" "Yes." She contrived a smile for him, because he was so kind, and his eyebrows were so funny. They were black, and they spurted suddenly out from above his eyes like moustaches stuck on in the wrong place. They fascinated her, because she had never seen any like them before. But she mustn't let the good man know that she was smiling at his moustaches instead of at him. "What is Sweetwater like?" she asked. "Do you suppose I'll love it?" His eyebrows arched themselves jerkily. "Well, that depends on the folks you've got there, daughter." "I don't see why," she contended. "There are lots of places you could like without folks. There are places, you know, where you never could get lonesome, even if you stayed there by yourself for hours and hours. They're so pretty and peaceful, they rest you, and happify you, as the darkies say, so you feel right at home there. And you enjoy being yourself so much that you don't miss other people." "Yes, that's right." The eye moustaches twinkled at her cheerily, and then the conductor moved off down the aisle without trying to prove his point, as if indeed he preferred not to. Letty huddled again in the corner of her red plush prison and gazed out of the window. The train was scudding along what seemed to be abandoned peach orchards, where unkempt trees were growing, their leafless branches sprawled and scrawny, instead of being trimmed and tended as in the orchards that she knew at home. And there were no fences round them, no protection at all to keep thieves from stealing the fruit in summer when there was any. Queer. They were the largest orchards she had ever seen, she reflected, for they stretched along both sides of the track for miles and miles. She hadn't noticed just where they began, and it seemed as if they never would end. The ground was covered with a dead grass that waved in the wind, bent low, as if water were rippling over it. The trees weren't planted in rows, but scattered irregularly in a wild and lawless abandon. She puzzled over the strangeness of it all. She thought illogically of a remark she had heard once from an old man: "All signs fail in Texas." When the little red-plaid girl came by again, Letty put out a hand to detain her. "Why don't they have fences to their peach orchards?" she asked. "Where?" the child wished to know. Letty pointed to the trees on each side of the track. The little girl stared at her in puzzled fashion for a moment, and then she giggled, with laughter as light and spontaneous as soap bubbles of mirth. The Dallas News was lowered, and Letty saw that the man across the aisle was smiling in amusement somewhat carefully restrained. He had been listening then to what she said. "Those are mesquite trees. Wild," he volunteered. Letty blushed and drew back. When Letty blushed, the process was one to distract and delight the beholder, as if the pink of peach blooms had suddenly turned into rosy flame. It always scared and upset her when it happened, so that in consequence she blushed more vividly than ever. As if to reassure her, because sympathetic of her emotions, the man erected the barricade of Dallas News again, though with manifest reluctance. After a moment, when he no doubt thought that she had somewhat recovered, he ventured forth again. "They do look like old peach trees. I've heard folks often say the same thing." Letty made no answer. With a lingering glance, which made her color flare up again, he retired behind his paper, and made no effort to prolong the conversation. As the miles slipped by, Letty noticed that the mesquites tended to grow smaller. At first they had been large, not like forest trees, of course, but good-sized, while now they were dwindling. Why was that? She looked for other trees, but saw none of her old familiar friends, only these stranger mesquites. She felt depressed and forlorn. Would life snatch from her even the trees she loved? But of course it was a long way yet to Sweetwater, and the landscape could change a lot before she got there. She needn't worry. Still, she leaned her cheek against her hand and gave herself up to unhappy premonitions. To go into a country you didn't know about was hard, and to leave the home you had loved all your life was cruel. Life didn't leave you much choice, but just shoved you around as if you hadn't any right to feelings. Suddenly, when she was wiping away a surreptitious tear, she was roused by a touch on her shoulder. Starting up, she saw that the man from across the aisle had moved over and sat beside her. He spoke casually. "Like to see some prairie dogs? Maybe you never saw any." "No," she said, fluttering rosily. "I never have." He pointed one forefinger toward the ground beside the track, and her following gaze saw a stretch of land with small hummocks scattered over it, like earthen breastworks thrown up for Lilliputian warfare. Queer little animals were disporting themselves about them, red-brown, dumpy creatures like young puppies that had not yet begun to lengthen into dogs, some sitting on their haunches on top of the mounds, some scampering about on the ground that was bare of vegetation and hard-packed as a floor. Some looked with suspicion at the train, and then dived down into holes in the ground. Some ran clumsily away, while a few held their place with impudent disdain of engines and human beings. "This is a dog town," the man went on to elaborate. "They have a colony, you see, and they dig underground homes for themselves and live down there. I reckon that's where the old settlers got their notion of dugouts. Sometimes rattlers live in the holes with them, or maybe only in holes they've left. And ground squirrels and hoot owls. They have tunnels running between the mounds all over the place." "Why, how cunning!" she cried, forgetting her woes and her faint fear of the stranger. To think there were such darling little animals she had never even heard of. She leaned in excitement against the window and flattened her nose against the glass like a youngster to watch them in their antics. "Does a prairie dog town have a mayor and a city council?" She laughed dimplingly. "I don't see the church, or the schoolhouse, or the jail." He grinned. "I reckon they're not much of a religious or educated bunch, any more than the rest of us out here. But they're sociable little cusses and mighty human in some of their ways. The children make pets of 'em." Her fancy flashed off to the government of a prairie dog settlement. "That fat, lazy one there must be the bigwig, the rich man," she hazarded. "His mound is higher than the others, and he didn't duck when he saw the train coming. Some of 'em are silly cowards." "Like folks," he concurred, as he twisted his moustache with long brown fingers and smiled. He settled back at ease beside her, as if there could be no possibility of his being unwelcome. His air was that of a man who had a lazy energy well controlled, beneath whose apparent indolence a superb strength lay concealed, whose interested indifference was not greatly accustomed to rebuffs. He smilingly looked down at her. Letty, who had been but momentarily startled out of her shyness in the excitement of seeing prairie dogs for the first time, now gave a quick frown and drew back within her shell of reserve. But the stranger appeared not to notice. Or was it that he noticed and disregarded? "Live in Texas?" he asked. "No," she said coldly. She wouldn't talk with him, and then he would go away and leave her alone. Who was he that he should speak to her like this? And then, almost without her volition, her sense of truthfulness answered his question. "I haven't, but I guess I'm going to," she faltered, facing the fact definitely for the first time. The blue eyes filmed with tears, and the scarlet, fluted mouth, like a pomegranate flower, quivered. "Going far?" he probed. Considerately, he made no mention of her emotion. "I get off at Sweetwater. Do you know the place?" "Yes." Her desire for information, her thirst for facts about this place that was to be her home, struggled with her timidity, and won. "Tell me about it. Will I like living there?" Her tone had an anxious eagerness that made him slow in his reply, as if he must choose his words with care. He deliberated with judicial gravity, while she looked her palpitating suspense. At last he spoke. "What do you say to a bargain? I'll tell you about Sweetwater, if you'll tell me first about the place you come from. Fair enough?" "I guess so," she stammered. Now she was practically forced to talk to him. Did he really want to hear about Virginia, or was he pretending? She looked out of the window as if to evoke a picture, and then she turned back to him. "My home is, or was, in Virginia, in a little town you never heard of, I suppose. It's like the country, but it's a town too, so you don't get lonesome. There are neighbors and young people to go about with, but still it's just as green and lovely as the country could be." She had to pause an instant, struggling with homesickness. Oh, that little loved country town in Virginia. When would she see it again? Would life fling years as well as miles between it and her? He gave a smile to encourage her. "Sounds nice. Never was in Virginia myself. Tell me how the place looks." She got a grip on herself. Perhaps he did want to hear about it, and if so, she must do justice to Virginia for one who had never been there to see it for himself. She must show it to him in her words, so that he'd know how dear and beautiful it was. "Our house—" Here she choked an instant, remembering that it was not hers any more. "The house I lived in isn't so very big, but it's homey. It's old, because Grandfather Mason built it for his bride when he was married the first time. It's out in the edge of town and has a wide porch across the front, so you can sit and watch the sunset through the pine trees at one side. You can see the sunrise on the other side, across a lake that has willows dipping in the water, and alders, and other lovely greeny stuffs. She closed her eyes a moment, as if blinded with memories. There are woodsy roads rambling round, with sumac bright in the sun, and wild honeysuckle trailing everywhere, making the whole place sweet with its smell, and blackberry vines so pretty when the white blossoms are out, and so luscious when the berries are ripe in summer, and Virginia creeper, and the trumpet vine with its wonderful red bugles, climbing up the trees and covering the fence posts and stumps, and a vine we call the cigar plant, with its little long red bloom like a tiny lighted cigar. That's a sensible sounding plant, he threw in. Vines are all beautiful, I think. They're like charity, for they go covering up the ugly things and places, the dead trees, the stumps and rough fence posts, and make everything graceful. Her tone was dreamily reminiscent now. That's right, he agreed, with smiling attention. And the flowers. There are all sorts of wild flowers there, too, so many I couldn't name them all, but I love every one. There's the butterfly weed that the darkies call chigger plant. How funny to call it that, when it has gay orange blossoms like gorgeous butterflies lighted there for a second. You can almost see them fold and unfold their wings. Yes. Then there are the daisies that bloom everywhere in early summer, acres on acres of them, white with golden hearts, nodding at you in the sun like children, telling you to come and play with them, and wild tiger lilies in the shadowy places, like Indian girls in gay blankets, and the blue-eyed grass, and Jack in the pulpit, and bouncing Bet, and the wild roses are the sweetest things in the world, so pink and delicate and perfect, and the jewel-weed in shady spots, and wild violets, and Queen Anne's lace with the flowers as fine as cobwebs, and the little birds' nests of green curled up, and wild morning glory running everywhere, and black-eyed Susans. And, oh, I couldn't possibly tell you about all of them. She paused breathlessly after her rush of words. Then she blushed to think how much she had been talking to this stranger. Guess I'll have to go and see them myself sometime, he rendered opinion. So maybe he was interested after all, and not pretending. And the trees, she went on, not wishing to slight such dear friends. I mustn't forget them. Such wonderful trees as we do have there. Pines that stand on tiptoe to peek into heaven, so I always feel like asking them what they see there. And tulip poplars that have such gorgeous blooms, and dogwood that makes the hills all white in springtime, and holly with its berries for Christmas. There's a big mimosa on our lawn. Did you ever see a mimosa? He shook his head regretfully. His look seemed to hint that he recognized that not having seen a mimosa tree, he had led a wasted life. She tried to make it up to him. Its leaves are lacy like ferns, and its blooms are tiny pompons like flowers of the sensitive plant, pinkish yellow, soft as soft. There's a big magnolia there too. You know, a magnolia is such a joy, for you can write on the leaves while they are glossy and dark, and even after they've turned brown, you can still read what you've written. And the flowers! When I see a magnolia blossom, it seems to me it must have fallen down from heaven in the night. She caught her breath sharply. I do hope there'll be magnolias in Sweetwater. He cherished his moustache without enlightening her on that point. "What else is there?" he asked. "There's a hedge of crab myrtle by the garden. In late summer it has rose-colored blooms like silky, crinkled crepe, the prettiest thing you ever saw. You want to love it and make little dance frocks out of it. In the fall the trees in the town and in the woods are all colors, yellow and brown and bronze and red, so that I often wonder which I love best, springtime or autumn." "What did you do all day?" he questioned. "Oh, I wasn't idle. I took care of mother and made my own clothes and taught a class in Sunday school and helped with church suppers. And I read a lot, everything I could get, and I took music lessons and had a good time with the boys and girls." She turned to him suddenly, shutting the door on her past. "Now, tell me about Sweetwater, and please tell me I'll love it there." The blue eyes, the scarlet-fluted mouth, the tremulous dimple all entreated him to speak well of Sweetwater. He uttered but one curt word: "No." Her eyes widened in dismay and reproach. "Why not?" He folded his arms and looked at her keenly. "Go back to your Virginia, little girl. This country's not like what you've been used to. Take my advice and vamoose, while the going's good." Her chin trembled. "But I can't," she jerked. "I haven't any money, and I haven't got anything to go back to." "Why did you ever leave?" he flung at her. She looked at him with piteous eyes, defending herself against what she felt to be an accusation. "Mother died, and she was all I had left." She caught her under lip with her teeth to stop its quivering. "And she'd been sick so long that after she was dead, the deaths licked up the homestead and everything, just like an earthquake swallowing them." "What are you doing so far down here?" "Cousin Beverly owns a ranch in West Texas. I haven't seen him since I was a child, but the pastor wrote to him after Mother died and asked him if I couldn't come out and live with them. Cousin Beverly said to come on, if I thought it best, that I could teach the children. He was afraid I wouldn't like it much, but the neighbors thought I'd better come. It would be a change for me, they said." "It'll be a change, all right." His tone was grim. "A hell of a change." She felt chill with an indefinable fear of the future, as if some cold, dark wing had fanned her. She tried to ask him a question, but for the moment she could not find her voice to speak. Her blue eyes gazed enthralled at him, as if he could read for her the future, could reveal what lay for her behind the curtains of the coming days. He turned to face her unsmilingly. "What's your cousin's name?" "Beverly Mason." Even the syllables of that dear name sounded unfamiliar to her, as if this strange environment had cast a spell over everything. "I've seen him. He's a good hombre," he answered briefly. "But he don't live in Sweetwater. What made you think he did?" "His letter was mailed from there." He gave an unhumorous smile. "Out in this country, a man may live 100 miles from his postmark. He don't go for mail twice a day, you understand? Bev Mason's ranch is over 25 miles from Sweetwater. I've got an outfit farther west myself, but I live in Fort Worth. Couldn't hog-tie me to stay all year round out here. Savez?" The hands that lay loosely in her lap were trembling. "But what is the trouble with the country, that you tell me to go back?" "Oh, it's all right for them that like it. Some do. Mostly men, though. It's hard on the women. Folks say the West is good enough for a man or a dog, but no place for a woman or a cat." "But Why? Why? The wind is the worst thing. She drew a relieved sigh. Oh, wind? That's nothing to be afraid of. He went on as though she had not spoken. It's ruination to a woman's looks and nerves pretty often. It dries up her skin till it gets brown and tough as leather. It nearabouts puts her eyes out with the sand it blows in 'em all day. It gets on her nerves with its constant blowing, makes her irritable and jumpy. She gave a light, casual gesture with one hand. It blows everywhere, I reckon, even in Virginia. Sometimes in winter we have regular storms of wind and rain, but we don't think anything of them. He gave her an amused sidelong glance, and twisted his moustache in silence. His air was that of an adult who disdains to attempt to make anything clear to a persistent but silly child. What else is there so terrible out there? She prodded. The man was just teasing her, of course, and she would let him see that she wasn't so easily gulled. The work out there is hard on women. Can't get any help and can't have the conveniences they have in other sections. Plenty of cowboys to run the ranch, but no women to help in the house. And the truck department on a regular ranch is no job to sneeze at, let me tell ya. I won't mind that either, she affirmed courageously. I always worked at home, as I told you. I did the dusting. You'll have a chore on your hands if you keep up that end of it out here, he said sardonically. His white teeth gleamed in a smile. She was rather breathless, but would not surrender. What else? She demanded. Women get lonesome. No neighbors if you live on a ranch. Just a few cowboys and too damned many cattle and coyotes. It's enough to run a woman loco. But the men stand it, don't they? It's a man-sized job. And the cowpunchers can go to town every so often and get on a high lonesome and lose money at poker. That relieves them. But the women can't do that, poor calicos. They got to stay bottled up, and it's liable to bust 'em sooner or later. She began to feel that he might be serious. She took a few moments to study the question while she looked out of the window in silence. Then she turned to him. It's not what I choose, but I didn't know what else to do. Oh, why aren't girls taught to make their living and take care of themselves the same as men? Her little black-bordered handkerchief dabbed at her eyes. The man turned his searching gaze on her and spoke meditatively, with a sort of crisp drawl. It'd be a pity for that pretty face of yours to be ruined by the wind, like I've seen some women's faces. If you stay out here, 'twon't be long before your skin won't be as pink and white as it is now. In a little while your hair won't be as yellow and soft, after the hot sun has bleached it and the wind has roughed it. Pretty soon your eyes won't be as clear and blue as they are now, after the sand has near about blinded 'em, if you stay out here. She turned from him in bitter silence and gazed at the telephone poles. The man beside her whistled softly, a weird, haunting tune. Then he began to sing words to it. Oh, bury me not on the lone prairie, where the wild coyotes will howl over me, in a narrow grave just 6 by 3. Oh, bury me not on the lone prairie. Tears began to trickle down her cheeks. He leaned closer and spoke softly, yet with a hint of savage constraint, as if he disliked his words. If you don't want to go, you don't have to, little girl. Come back to Fort Worth with me, and I'll fix up something for you. The eyes lifted to his held no look of suspicion, but only reserve and a vague fear. his own lowered before their innocence. "Thank you," she said with dignity, wiping away her tears. "But I couldn't do that, of course. I couldn't impose on a stranger. And Cousin Beverly is expecting me." "You're right. Better go to Cousin Bev," he muttered. His eyes looked disappointed, yet relieved. His face of a sudden seemed younger, more boyish, as if a mask of years and worldly experience had dropped from it. Then, as he pondered, the mask slipped back in place, and the years laid their shadows over his eyes once more. "I'll give you my name and address, so you can write me any time you feel you want to leave," he said hurriedly. "If you find you can't stand it, let me know and I'll come running. I may come, anyhow." He took from his pocket an envelope, extracted from it a letter which he threw out of the window, and then gave her the envelope. It was addressed to Mr. Wirt Roddy, Fort Worth, Texas. The writing was that of a woman. Letty took it somewhat dubiously. "Thank you, but I guess I'll not need to use it. I'm going to try to like my new home." "Here's hoping you will," he responded, suave and unperturbed. "But keep the address so you'll have it handy in case you want to make a getaway. I can always help you out. I've got spondulics to do what I like with. And even if Fort Worth's not so pretty as your Virginia, it's not as bad as the cow and sand country at that, where the wind comes larruping over the prairie like wild mustangs on a stampede." "You talk about wind like it was a woman," she said with an attempt at bravado. He chuckled. "No, 'tain't human. It's a devil. 7 devils sometimes when it goes rampaging round." "Well, what of it? So long as you know it's nothing but wind and can't hurt you." Her eyes had an upward appeal, and her voice a lilt like a little brook speaking softly to itself, the innocent candor of a child that has been protected and gently dealt with, so that it is not used to being hurt or afraid, and scarcely knows enough to feel apprehension of any danger. His gaze expressed playful superiority. "Ho, can't hurt you," he scoffed. "Don't you know this is a cyclone country you're coming to? Hasn't anybody told you that the settlers dig themselves storm cellars to run to almost before they build their houses?" Her cheek paled a little, but the dimple near the corner of her mouth still twinkled intrepidly, and her voice was brave, though small. "What are the cyclones like?" "Well, a cyclone is a tornado of a special deadly brand we have out here," he bragged. "It's a bull buffalo of a wind that whirls in a circle like a dancing dervish, while it races ahead at the same time. It's shaped like a funnel, small at the ground and spreading out wide at the top." He gestured to illustrate, and paused in enjoyment of her dismay. "It's a regular wind, a snuff-dipper of a wind. It catches up sand so's you can see it plain as a tree. It goes upward toward the sky like a cloud. It whizzes faster 'n an express train can go, and where it's passed there ain't enough remains of anything to hold an inquest over. If it was a house or a town, it's in splinters, and if it was a person, well, there's nothing left but a grease spot." He smiled in pride over this virile wind he had called up. "Did you ever see one?" Her voice quavered in spite of her effort to keep it firm. "Once. And once was a plenty. I was considerable distance off, too, when I viewed it. You can see the thing for a mile, if it comes in the daytime, but if it comes at night, you don't know anything till it swoops down on you, roaring like a prairie fire." His tone was serious now. She tried to sift out the truth from the jest, and her thumping heart told her that he had not invented this Texas storm. She sat with paling cheeks and hands tightly clasped in her lap. She was coming to a cyclone country, and wind was not merely a thing to be hated because it would ruin your skin and your eyes and hair and wreck your nerves. It was a terror that might pass by day or night, to leave death and devastation in its path. In the day when you could see its frightfulness, or in the night when you could only hear it roaring and imagine. She shuddered as she pictured a vast, swaying cloud of sand that spiraled to the sky, a mighty engine of destruction sweeping over the land, before which human beings were as helpless as rag dolls, that tore houses and towns to splinters. A cyclone. As in a nightmare she saw herself, palsied with terror, watching the mad, immense whirlwind sweep toward her, engulf her. Her body quivered, and the little rounded chin was unsteady. "I think you're cruel to tell me such things to scare me," she cried with a catch in her voice. He looked gratified at the effect of his eloquence, and magnanimously willing to temper the horrors a trifle in compassion for her tremors. "Well, now, I'm only just telling you what you got to look out for in this section. But of course cyclones don't come so often. You might live here for a long time and never see one, and then again you might run spang into one the first rattle out of the box." She turned from him and gazed out of the window. Even if all this was true, it wasn't kind of him to tell her, to scare her when she was coming out here to live. The man folded his arms and sat in silence beside her, humorously tolerant of her resentment, with the air of a man who is sure of himself and of others, and hence need feel small impulse toward haste or awkwardness. The girl felt a quiver of fear of him, she could not have told why. She had never been afraid of anybody before, since in her quiet world even tramps were just men out of work, who wanted food and a kindly word before they passed on their way. But this stranger made her giddily apprehensive in some inexplicable way. Why should he tease her and scare her like this? She wouldn't notice him any more, she would forget what he had said, and then, maybe, it wouldn't be true. If she looked out of the window and let him see she didn't care to talk to him any more, he would go away. Perhaps he was just teasing her, and presently would apologize and tell her there was nothing to be afraid of in this West where she had to live. She glanced at him to see if he had it in mind to apologize, but he only smiled at her and said no word. She wouldn't speak. She wouldn't, at all. She would ignore him, she would forget him. But she couldn't, somehow. She was aware of his presence, even though she wouldn't look at him. Her spirit tremblingly closed up under his influence, like the leaves of a sensitive plant at an alien touch. Her very body knew that he was there. But she kept her face resolutely turned from him, her eyes fixed on the landscape that glided by. She saw a wide, flat expanse of prairie, with diminishing mesquites, dead bunch grass on which long-horned cattle were grazing in the unfenced pastures along the track, gaunt creatures that stopped their feeding to look in panic at the train as it approached them. The very cows seemed afraid of something in this strange country. Presently she saw on the ground beside the track the carcass of a cow with long horns, and ribs prominently outlined beneath the hide, a starved-looking cow. She felt a thrill of pity for its fate, and thought of the sleek, well-fed cows in the pastures back home. Would the new owners of old Bossy, the brown-eyed Jersey that had to be sold, be good to her? She had loved Bossy like a friend, and had wept at seeing her led away. But Bossy was fat and gentle, not like these wild creatures. Well, at least there would be plenty of cattle on a ranch, and maybe she could make friends with some of them. There would be little young calves to pet, with wobbly legs and cold, poking noses that nuzzled into your hand. The mesquites were much smaller now, scarcely more than bushes, and the wind was blowing harder, for the grey grasses over the plains were bent lower in the sweep of it. As the train rattled noisily along, some of the cattle galloped off to a distance and gazed back in timorous belligerency as at an enemy to be feared and distrusted. There beside the track was another body, one that had evidently been there a long time, for the bones were showing through the hide. Who looked after all those cattle, anyhow? She couldn't see any houses near, any signs of human habitation. What a lonesome land it was! Presently the engine gave a shrill hoot, as if signaling, but there was no one in sight. Was it just practicing to keep in running order? The distances between towns was so long out here that maybe the engine would forget how to hoot if it didn't clear its throat now and then. Engines were funny things, almost like folks. In another instant they passed a cow that was staggering along the track from the direction of the engine, one hind leg hanging broken and useless, its back bleeding. Letty cried out, "Oh, the poor thing!" The man turned a careless glance at the animal. "Yep, train hit her." She shuddered. "Why don't they stop and do something for the poor creature?" He shrugged his shoulders and answered comfortably, "It'll die after a while, likely, same as these others you see along the track. Train gets one pretty often." "Why, how perfectly terrible!" she gasped. A lump moved up and down painfully in her throat. He shook his head reassuringly. "These critters aren't worth much a head. No loss." She flashed him a look of burning indignation. "And is that what has happened to the others I saw?" "Sure. You see, there's no fence to the right of way along here. The darn fools try to cross in front of the train, and they get what's coming to them. Too bad, but it can't be helped," he added, in concession to her evident disturbance over the matter. She leaned her head upon her hand, of a sudden feeling sick and faint. Her mind followed the poor thing as it staggered along, hurt and terrified, to fall by the way in that lonely land, to die maybe of starvation, by slow degrees. And the train hooted on its way, not caring for its sufferings, a train full of people who ought to be kind. Her hands clenched tightly. "Life is cruel," she choked. "Looks hard, but that's the way life is," he said more sympathetically. "The engineer toots the whistle when he sees a cow on the track to give her warning she'd better get off. If she don't tumble to it, the cow-catcher catches her and throws her to one side, so she don't get ground under the wheels and maybe wreck the train." She made no answer. She was facing for the first time life's possibilities of cruelty. How could this man talk so indifferently when... He went on in elaboration. "Most times they get off in time. And train schedules would be shot to pieces if they stopped to tend to all the old cows in this cattle country." She couldn't argue the question with him, but she still felt vehemently that men should be more humane. If she tried to speak, she might begin to cry, and she mustn't do that. She gazed steadily out of the window. There was another prairie dog town, its citizens coming out to watch the train come, just as the boys and girls did when the afternoon train came in at home. Home. Her throat ached with suppressed sobs, but she held her head erect. She wouldn't give way, she wouldn't cry. Presently the man went on with the discussion, as if there had been no pause. And you never can tell. Sometimes they die quick and are out of their misery. But then again, an old cow that looks ready for the boneyard will get over her broken leg and hop around spry as you please on 3 pins. At last she spoke with repressed intensity of tone. And is this the trail to your west? The bodies of the poor creatures you've killed? Yes. If you was to fall off the train and didn't see the track to go by, you could pretty near find your way west by following the trail of dead cattle here and there along the road. It's horrible. He smiled genially. Don't blame me for it, little girl. It's not my train, and not even my west, as I told you. I just own a few sections of land out there for my ranch, and I go out now and then. But it's not my regular stamping ground, remember? She sat in silence for a time, reflecting. All the old values seemed left behind. Ahead lay the path to the west, with its trail of broken bodies, its threats of storms and unknown perils, its winds that would torment her. Behind her lay the road whose shining rails led backward toward Virginia, toward home. The afternoon was waning now, and she could see the sun beginning to sink toward the west. At this time in Virginia, the colored boys would be driving the cows home from pasture, their soft voices calling to them one, by name. A wave of desolation swept over her, almost overwhelmed her. Homesickness so acute that it was physical agony possessed her. She felt she must shriek aloud for the train to stop, for the wheels to reverse, and let her go back to Virginia. She felt a mad impulse to fling herself from the train, to chance her fate by the wayside, even in that wild, lonely land, to walk back to Virginia if need be, if she could get there no other way. Home. Then a still crueler hurt checked her savagely, the remembrance that she had no home there any more. Strangers warmed themselves at the old hearth fires. The household possessions were scattered, even her childhood books and toys given away. Her past had been snatched from her. The wheels turned on relentlessly, bearing her ever toward the west. Their sound was like a monotonous chant, "No home, no home, no home." To be homesick for a home you didn't have any more was the worst hurt in the world, because there wasn't any hope that you could ever win back to it in any future. It was gone forever. Thinking of it was like hearing the clods fall on the coffin of the one dearest to you. There was no place anywhere that she could call her own now, none but the old family lot in the churchyard at home, where her mother lay under a fresh mound, with a white stone at her head, beside the father who had died long ago. The cool, shadowy peace of the spot wooed her. It would be good to lie there, at rest. But the wheels ground on, still westward. Letty could hear the steady swish of the wind that never stopped blowing, the chant of the wheels in their mockery of her. From time to time she saw beside the track another body, or a whitened skeleton, or perhaps but scattered bones to tell a story of what had happened. The man beside her touched her arm. "You ought to watch the sunset," he told her. "A sunset on the Texas prairie is a sight worth looking at, even if you've seen as many a one as I have." As she looked, she saw before her a sky incredibly blue, of a clear, pure color, such as she had never seen before. Far, far ahead to the west, where the earth met the sky, the sun rested, a great ball of flame, its rays spreading outward and upward to the heavens it had left. In that high, clear altitude, where one can see to great distances, the sun seemed at once remote and close at hand. The wind-blown clouds above were touched to brilliant orange, rose, and gold, and all imaginable shadings of rainbow hues. There was nothing to break the view, nor tree, nor house, nor hill, only the free sweep of the prairie, which was now a shimmering gray lit by reflected light, and at the horizon's edge the burning splendor of the sun. It seemed to Letty that the train should stop in awe to view the spectacle, that men should remove their hats before this pageant of a world on fire, with a vast desert for a stage, and no spectators save a few indifferent passengers on a train. She caught her breath in wonder and delight, and for a while forgot her problems, feeling curiously calmed and yet exhilarated by the sight. Then she turned suddenly away. "I won't look too long," she said in a low voice. "I can't bear to watch it fade. I'll hang that sunset in my mind as a picture and remember it always." "You're a funny kid," the man muttered. "It hurts to see things fade. Beautiful things should go out in a high glory." He smiled. "A sunrise out here is grander still. Will you some day watch a sunrise on the plains and think of me?" She nodded. The train sped onward, bearing her straight toward the burning sunset, toward the west. Would it be a land of glory as well as a land of fear and cruelty, perhaps? After a while the conductor stopped to speak to Letty. "We'll have some supper at Abilene. We're running late. Had a hot box." "Thank you, but I don't care for any," she answered. "I don't think I'm a bit hungry." "Oh yes, better eat a little snack," he advised. "Some time yet before we pull into Sweetwater." And so she got off with the others at Abilene. Mr. Wirt Roddy walked along beside her, and insisted on buying ham sandwiches and fruit and little cakes, which they took back to the train to eat. "Like a picnic or a box supper at a church sociable," he said with a laugh, as if to make her feel that the situation was all right. The early dark of winter came on, shutting out the world as if with a vast curtain, and the brakesman lighted the hanging lamps that swayed and flared smokily with the motion of the train. Letty felt a strange depression which she could not analyze, a feeling as if she were hurtling through space and yet staying still. Was there any world outside this moving car? Any time beyond this hour of the present? What life lay for her behind the dark curtains of the future, in this land unlike anything she had ever known? Should she be equal to it? A strange, fluid fear enthralled her, a trembling of body and spirit, a dreamy unrest that was by turns ice and flame. Silence had laid a stilling finger on her soul. The man beside her sat in silence too. She could feel his gaze upon her, but he sat with folded arms, not speaking. Of what was he thinking? When the train slowed up at a little town, she started up in a panic, thinking it was Sweetwater. But he laid a hand on her arm. "Not yet. This is Merkel." She sank back without a word. The train moved on again, and she could hear only the ceaseless clack of the wheels, could imagine she heard the swish and shriek of the wind, and the thick, rhythmic pounding of her heart. At last the man spoke. We're coming into Sweetwater now. You'll have to get ready and be off pronto, for the train don't stop but just a few minutes." She rose, hurriedly put on her hat and cloak, and started to pick up her old-fashioned telescope valise, but he took it from her. "I'll bring this." "Oh, is this your station too?" she stammered. "No, I go on to Colorado City, but I'll see you off." The conductor came along, his lantern swung over his arm. "Here's where you leave us, little lady. I'll help you." "No, I'll look after her," replied the other. And so it was Mr. Wirt Roddy that lifted her valise off, and then helped her from the car to the ground. The wind swooped at her like a mad malevolence, so that she had to clutch her hat to keep it from being blown away. She staggered, and would have fallen before its fury, had not Mr. Wirt Roddy caught her to him for an instant to steady her. She shivered at his touch. The night was pitch dark. Only the light from the little station-house door, and the conductor's lantern at the end of the train, and a few twinkles here and there from scattered houses, gave any illumination. Letty looked around swiftly to find Cousin Beverley. She hadn't seen him since she was a child, but she would know him, of course. But she saw only the station agent at the door, the conductor swinging his lantern, and besides them only two rough-looking men in heavy coats and leather trousers and broad-brimmed hats. They stared at her with curiosity. But neither was Cousin Beverley. And there was no one else there. Cousin Beverley hadn't come to meet her. The train bell rang its signal to depart. "All aboard!" called the conductor at the other end of the train. The wind caught Letty in an icy swirl, and its sound rose to a shriek. End of chapter 1.